Okay, thanks everybody for joining. We're hopefully Alex will join us here in a minute. Okay, let's get started. So the minutes of the meeting held May 25th. Any comments on that? And on those, any omissions, any additions? Nope. Okay, can I have a motion to accept those minutes, please?
Sure, I'll make that motion.
Dave, seconded by Maureen.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor? Great. Okay. Financial report. Hold on.
So I don't think anything has changed since the last meeting that we had. Did you send anything in? I know you had mentioned you had some receipts. I haven't seen anything come through asking me to sign off. Okay. It's possible if Yvette sees them, she may sign off on them. So I haven't seen anything. So I think we're still generally in the same position. We had $5,300 remaining. I think we're still there. All the repairs that were done on Station Trail came out of a park reserve, so there was no funds pulled from the Trails Committee at all to make those renovation or those repairs happen.
Okay,
Great.
great. Thank you. Meredith, anything from Orca?
There we go. No, I don't think there's a whole lot to report. I did speak with Dan earlier today, and he mentioned the ash tree over near the dam. That is something that'll get looked at later on this summer.
Okay.
But I think that is really the only thing to report at this time. Just so everybody knows, we are opening all of our campgrounds this weekend, so that is exciting. And as Maureen mentioned, that the Millbrook Valley Trails are getting a lot of use. We're certainly noticing our conservation areas are heavily used right now. So all of the signage is up, and people seem to be doing a good job of physical distancing and things like that. So that's great to see. But yeah, everybody seems really excited to be able to get outside and get into nature. So that's great.
Okay. Meredith, do you have any information on when the ash tree comes down? Will it just be a sort of a one-day thing, or they're not anticipating closing anything or blocking?
That I don't know, because I don't think any contractors have been scheduled yet, but I can certainly let you know.
Yeah, if you could just maybe give us a heads up. I assume Orca would do that anyway, but I envision they'd have to close the parking lot for a few hours anyway.
Probably, yeah, and I don't think we'll be the ones taking it down. So,
No.
yeah, but
Okay.
I'll let you know. Elena, I can do that through you and give you a heads up when that's going to happen. Okay.
Absolutely, and I can forward it out then, so everybody's
Great.
aware.
Thank
Should
you.
this is just a personal thing, Meredith. Obviously you have to have a contractor do it. I was wondering what was happening to the ash. Would I need to talk to Dan about that?
Like what happens to the actual tree?
Well, I was wondering if I could have some of it.
That I'll probably connect you with Dan for that, or you can reach out to him directly for that, because that would probably be part of the contract with whoever's removing the tree.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. It's just
okay.
It's a fairly nice one, but yeah, it depends. There's a lot of ash out there these days because of that, unfortunately. But I could always use some more.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. John's not here. Craig, are you able to do the trail report?
Sure. I guess I won't speak to some of the items that were in the report that came out this morning on invasives, which was excellent. I've walked the South Trails, the Med Mountain Trails, all the kind of what I think of as central trails, and then the Station Trail. I've been out quite a bit, more frequently than most times, like anybody, being at home, right, and easy access to the trails. I think everything's looking really good. I know along Station Trail, I think the last time we spoke, the projects have been completed with the culvert repairs, and I was was absolutely impressed with the contractors' ability to get in and out without a lot of site disturbance. In fact, in some areas, you barely even know they're in and out of the trail, particularly the one towards 10, where they did that major repair. So I think they've done great work. I don't really have anything else to report from that. I think all the trails are in great shape and they're being heavily used. I'm not sure what else you folks would be looking for in terms of a report, just given I've only been on the committee for about 6 months. I think you're generally looking for issues, right?
Yeah, and you didn't find any issues? Did you?
Well, there's
haven't-
still some outstanding board repairs that need to be made. I think they've been mentioned at the last meeting, and I don't know if we've had a chance to get it and fix some of those broken boards on some of the floating walks and some of the boardwalks. I know that with the Baxter Creek extension, if we find a way to get that trail reconnected where the flooding is, I noticed that there's, and you're probably well aware too, whoever uses that floating boardwalk, there's some boards that are quite out on that boardwalk there. So if anybody's if you're familiar with it, you know where the boards are out. But if you're not, you could go through in certain areas, and somebody could sprain an ankle or whatnot, right, on the boards. If you know what if you all are familiar with what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But given people aren't supposed to be. It says it's closed, but people will still probably might walk out along there. It's nice, particularly that the area where you have the overlook of the marsh. And the floating boardwalk. But if you walk further, there's about at least 3 areas where the boards are out. You can go through.
Yeah, I think we're sort of putting that on hold just to sort of figure out what we're going to do with that area and how it all plays out.
Yeah, I think longer term, I know Station Trail would probably could use some grading or mulching, particularly around where the abandoned cars, that old Challenger, I think it is, and in between that whole area really could use a little bit of grading work. I'm surprised it's still quite muddy, even though it's so dry out. So I think it's just indicative of how wet it can get along there, and could use some grading work or just some mulch. But I'd hate to introduce any. As soon as you start mulching and bringing in anything, you can start to develop a pathway for more invasive plants to get into, right? So you got to weigh it against that.
Okay. Did you happen to converse with John to see if he had any issues to be brought up?
I haven't seen John. I think he's. Yeah, I haven't seen him in a few weeks for sure.
Okay, okay. I was just wondering if you had split up the.
No, I think he hasn't been. I'm not sure where if he's been away or.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could add a few things if now's the right time.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm done, Dave.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Just a couple things I've noticed. The Baxter Creek Trail, just heading south towards Zion Line. Just the branches are starting to encroach on the trail area, and it kind of happens every couple of years, and we go through with loppers and take care of it, but it's getting due for that again. And also I sent an email to Alana just thinking it's about time to get weed whacking this summer on that section of trail in particular. I mean, it should be a smaller job than previous years. I think it's wise to just leave the closed section not weed whacked, and hopefully that'll help keep people out. So it would be a smaller job, just kind of going from the fairgrounds to Zion Line, and then hopefully just across the other side where the duck board is. But that's ready for trimming, and I think it'd be nice to hit it again in a month after that.
Has the municipality, the park staff, done that in the past? Is that normally they've done in there?
Yeah, Jerry's always arranged it, and last year he said that he had a guy on staff that was really proactive about it. So I'm not sure if there's been any staff turnover, but if not, then you might have a willing staff member already.
So we don't have an entire complement of our park staff back yet. So
Okay.
I was going to chat with you about this email or with the group. I definitely can send it, although it may be not something that happens as quickly as we might have seen in the past until we bring some of that staff back or they have an opportunity to go and do that. So I'm not sure, to do it again in a month it might be more like it happens in 2 or 3 weeks and gets done, you know, if it needs to be done again later, but I can definitely send it out and make the request.
Okay, yeah, I think if you're able to get someone who can do it, even if it is in 2 or 3 weeks, then if you just plan to do it a month afterwards, then it'll still be due.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll send it out today.
Okay, thanks. The other thing I was going to mention was, there's a couple of loose boards out on Ganny Transit at the Nice Bridge further to the west, I guess. And not just because, you know, we've attached the boards to fallen cedars, and I think the screws have pulled out or whatever. So a few of those will, if you stand on one end, they can pop up. So it's something I've been meaning to get to, but it's just not happening. So if anyone else is able to get out there with some, you know, 4-inch screws or something that's going to really hold on, that would be great. Otherwise, I'll keep trying to get to it at some point. The definitely constant battles with the caution tape on the closed section of Baxter Creek. So again, we probably want to get some rope or probably a closed sign made up or something. Should we just go ahead and get some rope and put it across, or does the township want to do something more official?
The closed signs are coming. They're part of the COVID signs that were getting made by Signorama.
Okay, great. The other thing I was going to suggest, just related to the just the branches and that are encroaching on the trail, that I've kind of thought about it for a year or two now to pick up a Milwaukee cordless hedge trimmer to add to our collection. And I don't know if now would be the right time to get them. I'm finding myself with less time than usual to do trail maintenance. So if I could get out with a cordless hedge trimmer instead of a pair of loppers, it would be easier for me if I'm doing that work.
We've got one, Dave.
A hedge trimmer?
Well,
not the weed whacker, but actually a hedge trimmer.
No, it's not a hedge trimmer in the sense that it's like a cedar hedge trimmer, but it's the handheld saw.
Oh yeah, I personally don't enjoy using that one. I find, like, when you get a branch that wants to flex on you, it's just, I'd much rather have like a proper hedge trimmer,
okay,
if possible. I looked them up there. Just to get the tool only is about $250 if you can find one in stock somewhere. So we'd probably be, you know, just over 300 after tax if that was a way we wanted to spend our money. But I do think it would make it easier. Just it would feel like less of a cumbersome job to get out and do that sort of thing if we had the right tool for it.
Okay, I'll investigate that then.
Okay. I think that's all I had. Yeah, trail report wise anyway.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Alex. I just wanted to add the status of the Mill Pond Meadow at Med. So I'm really surprised at how much grass is actually finally coming through. There's actually something for them to mow that actually looks like a surface. There's still too many big rocks, big meaning about the size of a potato, which I think would form a bit of a projectile risk if anyone is on the meadow when they're cutting. So if we can hand pick some of those as we go, that would be great. They might be useful in someone's garden. And there's still quite a lot of burdock and mullein that's getting mowed, and so it won't produce seed or anything like that, but it's unsightly, so that needs to be dug up and grass put where it was. And also that spring is, the runoff from the spring is splaying out all over the place. So it would be a good idea, I think, if it's all right with Orca, to dig a trench down toward the mill pond, so that when the fall rains start again and it gets frozen, it isn't so much an ice rink there next winter.
Yeah, we talked about that obviously as a potential workday item. But obviously that's, not happening for the foreseeable future. Matt, do we know if the township, do they have a small backhoe? I know they have a Bobcat, but I wasn't sure about.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the fleet, but there are backhoes that we have. I know there was recently one purchased. It's not small by any stretch of the imagination, because that's the majority of the work that we need it for. Whether there's a mini-size one, not in the tours of the works yards that I've come across. There is a skid steer, like you mentioned. There's a Bobcat, but I don't know if that is a amenable fit for the job.
No. And Meredith, what sort of permissions would we need in order just to dig a simple French drain? I mean, it would be.
Yeah, I'd certainly want one of our regs officers to come out and take a look at that. So, and that would probably be Don Allen, because he's the one that's worked with the committee, so he's relatively familiar with the area. But I'd want him to come and take a look and just kind of get a better sense of the dimensions of what you're proposing, where it's going to outlet to, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, you would need a permit if you've got any heavy equipment working in that area adjacent to the pond.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's fairly simple. It would be about, I've measured it, I've paced it off. It's about 120 feet probably. We'd need to bring gravel in for the French drain.
Yeah, so you'd want to know the estimates, like how much gravel, all that kind of stuff. You've gone through the application process before, but I can certainly connect him by email. Who would like to start that conversation, and I can initiate that discussion.
I'll start it, but I guess I have questions for Matt and Alana. I mean, this is not a one-person job. So how would, I mean, is this something that the township would allow us to do during these times? I mean, it's not an emergency repair by any means, but it would make the area a lot more user-friendly, and particularly in come the winter, as Maureen said. So what are your thoughts around that?
Well, I'll go first, and then Alana can correct me. Just with regards to, it's not a budgeted item. Obviously, within our financial planning to be done, and the only reason we were able to make an exception for the reserve contributions to get the station trail work done is due to the emergency nature of it. So it's not something that could be accomplished this year by any stretch of the imagination, but it sounds like with Orca's involvement, we would need some time and considerations for that as well for it to be considered. I think if you wanted to investigate it and then submit some sort of formal letter for council consideration, then you would have time to do that, but it wouldn't be something happening this year.
Okay, well, maybe there's confusion. My perspective was that we would pay for it out of our current budget.
Oh, I see.
It wasn't, I mean, I've sort of priced it out. I'm thinking probably $150 for the gravel and $100 for the O-pipe. It's not a, it's not a large cost by any means. It's just, it's just a fairly simple French drain. And it's something that the committee could do on themselves, but it would mean obviously a number of people.
Yeah, well, if that were the case, it would be a similar process, just for a formal letter for council to consider the nature of the project to be done. And then obviously staff would investigate and bring any concerns or requests that they might have to light after that consideration. So I can't speak for what council's will would be or what the CAO is going to dictate that we can or cannot do, but it's something that if we do some background work on and provide, build a case for it, it's definitely something that could be considered.
Okay.
But that's really an Yvette question, unless Alana wants to take it.
No, I was just going to say that if you can provide everything and I can chat with Yvette, if you want to send it to me, I can take it into Yvette or we can have a conversation. Depending on the scope and what we're looking at, we definitely want to make council aware. Does it require approval? I'm not sure. I guess it would depend on what it is. Financially, I would agree with Matthew. If there was, if we were looking for costs from the municipality, we probably would be challenged with that right now. But if it's coming out of our own budget, then that wouldn't be an issue. But if you can gather all the information and then I can sit and talk to Yvette and get back to you.
Okay,
As far as the number of people, we're restricted to what public health is telling us. So right now we're groups of 10 and maintaining the social distancing. So we just follow their direction at this point.
okay,
Yeah, if it's on the Orca portion of the property as well, then we will need to have that conversation to get
Yeah.
permission to actually do the work as well. Would you be able to do a screenshot for me and just show me exactly where you're thinking, just so I can start off that conversation, first of all, with the lands folks to see if there's what the process is for permission to do the work?
sure. Yeah, I'll
Okay.
go out this afternoon, take a picture and just sort of sketch something up.
Okay,
and
thank you.
Send it to you. And yeah, it's again, I don't want to concern anybody here. It's a fairly simple. I mean, we've dug French drains many times on the trails. This would be, a significantly larger one, but it's not a major undertaking in terms of construction and things. But I understand we need to have the proper permits in place and things. And I think, we've already got O-pipe in the shed or behind the shed. So I don't expect this to be a particularly large cost either. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Maureen, did you want to, just while we're on the topic of trail status, trail maintenance, did you want to talk about your email this afternoon? Maureen, you're on mute.
Sorry. Very much improved year on year. It was the second walk later in June that showed things really re-emerging. It's the elevated CO2 levels and the perfect conditions for vines where we've got trails. So it's going to be an endemic problem just because we have so many infested areas immediately adjacent to trails. But looking at those infested areas convinces me certainly that we need to keep doing this until the adjacent property managers and owners take ownership of their own problems. So Sean is interested in doing it if we're interested in hiring him. He would be using the same products again, wouldn't need to use as much of either of them because there isn't as much going on out there anymore. Unfortunately, he has to cover almost the same amount of ground, because the sparse clusters that there are widely spaced. And the stuff that's on Ganney Trail, he can only access on foot. So, and that's where it's right on the trail, essentially. So, so he feels he wants to get that eradicated for us. But it will repopulate on folks and under fenders, when people are coming off the Ganaraska itself. Nonetheless, I think it's worthy use of his time and our budget to keep it under control, and the farther toward eradication we get, the better off we will be for next year. So,
Maureen, sorry, Maureen, is that primarily poison ivy you're referring to on that trail, or is it both poison ivy and DSV?
There's a little bit of DSV where the unbranched horsetail is,
Okay.
behind Jill Williams' property. And there's a little bit of DSV on the west portion of the trail at its entrance heading toward the Shinto Bridge. But
Okay.
But beyond that, it's poison ivy, and it's walkers more than bikers that I'm concerned with. And there are more walkers. I meet more walkers and runners, cross-country runners out there now than I ever have before. So it has become a favorite, actually, that area of the trail, I think in part because of the bridge. So I don't think I would want to see it neglected this year, because I think we'll get a lot of rebound next year if we do neglect it now. There's always going to be poison ivy back in the bush, and we want there to be because there are animals that are dependent on it. But a lot of the area that we previously had to spray 2 years in a row, I'm now just hand culling sparse, very sparse stuff, just to keep it from seeding. I pick a bouquet every time I'm out there.
Okay. Do we have any estimation from Sean in terms of potential costs?
And no, he didn't venture toward that, but I would think it would be not more than last year and probably less.
And last year,
He charged 1,000, I think. He gave us a bit of a break on his time. But it's product, so it's whatever the price of the product is largely for him. And I've cut his time down a lot by really trying to get it organized so that he can use the ATV on the rail bed and access as much of it on foot from the ATV as he can, and then the rest of it I'll hand cull.
mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. The time consuming part is Gani Transit because he can't access any of it by ATV after he parks his truck in the parking area or on Jill's driveway.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Well, what do people think?
I think it's money well spent, especially in the poison ivy. In terms of poison ivy, just keeps people happy out there and safer for families. I think it's worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Dave too. I've seen a noticeable improvement on some of the trails. As much as then you see, I've seen some other trails where it's now starting to encroach in, be that particularly the dog strangling vine. But I know I've seen some of the trails in the past. They're almost inaccessible at some points in the year because of the ivy. For some people, if it bothers them, right?
Yeah, I mean, something we've done every year for sure. Alex, any thoughts?
Yeah, I have yet to hear a single person complain. I know they put the little posters up every time. I've seen in some other municipalities that people are very against any sort of herbicide type spray, but I've never heard any of that feedback from anyone here. So I think, yeah, it's money well spent. It seems to be working every year.
Okay, so should we set a motion with an upset limit?
Can I add one thing just before we get to that point? Sorry, Rob. The Ganaraska or the Peterborough Trail Builders Association has just completed a new trail that connects to Gani Transit. It's now open. It's right after that bridge, just to the west of it, and they're actively working on another new trail, which will be an uphill climbing trail that will also connect to Gani Transit right after that first mentioned trail. So I don't know if we're not going to take on any spraying related to their trails, but just I guess while we're talking about this and sort of adjacent properties and how invasive species might be carried towards our trail, just I don't know if there's any inclusion or I just thought I'd bring it up just sort of while we're at this stage in the conversation to just so everyone's aware, because those trails will be full of poison ivy.
You think they'd want to spend a couple $100 and have our guy look at spraying them as well, or?
Well, actually, that's a question worth asking for sure.
The difficulty there is, the more contoured, the more topography, the more interesting the bike trail is, the more difficult it is for Sean to carry the spray on his back walking.
Right.
It's really not easy. If maybe an e-bike would be helpful to him, but you know, as it is, some of the spraying that we asked him to do on Trenchtown in particular a few years back, and that's hard work in the heat. So I think you'd end up paying more than a couple hundred just to give you it would be a substantial amount especially if it's full of poison ivy. It'd be $1,000 for each of those trails probably that you're talking.
Well, and so I don't think it's as bad as it can be in the Ganaraska, but there is poison ivy. It's probably similar to Gani Transit and how that was. It's early days.
Yeah.
So maybe something we want to monitor. Like, is there a concern that will the poison? I know the DSV will sort of travel on wheels and tires. Like, is the poison ivy the same from your understanding, Marie?
Not as much. No, I mean it's just prolific anyway because it's a native plant and it likes living here. And we've opened up all kinds of dappled and open to sunlight spaces that didn't exist in the forest before. So it's going to gravitate toward our trails in general. But it's DSB is the one that it just takes full advantage of anything it can adhere to, and loves compacted trails. It just loves them. So so that's the issue. I think we will probably have to have an species maintenance program until DSV finds a natural or manufactured enemy. And some of that may be weed whacking. Some of it may be, we'll get it to a point where we can just weed whack. We're almost there actually. But carrying a weed whacker through the trails if we were to do it ourselves, would require you guys who are fit mountain bikers to do that. I'm not going to do that. I don't mind picking bouquets, but I'm not going to be weed whacking in the bush.
That's okay. Yeah.
We might be able to help too. If the kind of the bottleneck is him having to carry in jugs of this stuff, one or two of us could volunteer to just keep him well fed with jugs of fluid as he makes his way up. I think I've had this kind of experience with other contractors too, is as long as you take the labor intensive aspect of it out and they're just focused on what they're trained on doing, you can save hundreds of dollars. Especially, we've got volunteers available.
Yeah, I think we're getting a very good price from Sean as it is. I don't think that he's overcharging us at all, but I think that the Ganaraska trail situation is different because we've had a head start of several years of work. So so I was more responding to Dave's question about the Ganaraska, but I think $1,000 a year to get this done, and hopefully moving more and more to annual removal year on year will set us up for success. Like, we'll just be vigilant, especially along Gani Transit, because that's where it's coming along Gani Transit from the Ganaraska.
Just a quick update. Back when I went to the Woodlot Association meeting, they were doing trials with a certain type of caterpillar, the Hypena caterpillar. Anyways, I just found an article that's talking about it here. I'll try to dig up and see what the scoop is, because they were trying some in Ottawa and Toronto, little test areas where they were releasing them. Yeah, it's a caterpillar native to Ukraine, but apparently that's all it eats is dog strangling vine. When I talked to the ministry guys, was that last year I went to that thing? The trials seemed to be going quite well. It hadn't turned into a cane toad at least, so. I'll see if I can find a more up-to-date post on the subject. maybe that one will sort itself out over the next few years.
Okay. So I think sounds like we're all in favor of approving Sean to do some work. Do we want to set an upset limit of 1,000?
Sure, yeah, if that's enough.
Okay. Can I have somebody make the motion, please?
I move that we employ Sean Gillen of Ironwood Property Maintenance to spray invasive species, trails, poison ivy, and ESV with an upper limit of $1,000.
Yeah, second that.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, great. Just while we're on before we get off this trail statuses, going back to Craig's remarks on Station Trail. So I think there are, for those of you who have been out to see the repairs, I think I mentioned that there was some exposed roots, which I can go and cut away. But where the construction did have to come in from the yard on the main repair close to 10 next to the township yard, it could use some planting because they did obviously have to bring heavy equipment in there, and it now seems a bit bare. Meredith, is there going to be another sale in the fall of seedlings, or is that only in spring?
Yeah, we just do the seedling sales in the spring, but that doesn't mean you can't purchase them in the fall. There's generally a smaller selection, but they're still available. What kind of size would you be thinking of, like the little teeny guys or like bigger potted stock?
I don't know. I just think if we maybe put some cedars in there. Maureen, did you have any thoughts?
I think that area is gonna get very wet, right? It's really low.
Well, there's the secondary creek that sort of runs between the railbed trail and the yard, the works yard.
Right. So would cedars survive there if it's gonna get that wet? Would it be better to put in just mostly dogwood or something like that?
Is it inundated? Like, would they be submerged or would they just be wet?
Well, there were cedars there before.
Oh, okay. Yeah, then a combination of cedars and, as you said, Maureen, dogwoods would probably work out fine. Fall is a good time to plant things.
Okay.
It would be a better screen right away.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry.
Robert, before you make decisions in that regard, I believe, and I was going through my notes actually to look back. In a conversation I had with the CAO about the project when I was sending all of those emails around about clarifications, I think there was some site treatments that weren't going to be done this season, but I want to say repatriated, but that's not the word, but refurbishment.
Rehabilitation?
So yeah, exactly. Refurbishment. That's where we go. So anyways, let me just confirm that prior to, it sounds like with regards to we would be looking more to the fall anyway. So we'll have a meeting between now and then. And for the next meeting, I'll have that clarified.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I wasn't proposing anything.
No problem. Yeah.
Okay, that'd be great.
I believe it was mentioned. That's all. I just can't think of the exact statement and I can't seem to find it. So
It was site remediation.
something like that. Yeah. It was discussed to the extent of which is something that we can make a decision on after the fact. But I know it was said, and I'm not sure on the extent of which, because that wasn't really the concern at the time.
Okay, great. Okay, anything else on that before we move on to Craig? No? Okay. Well, I think we're going to hand it over here to Craig. He's got a bit of a presentation for us on GIS.
Yeah, so the presentation isn't so much on GIS, or it's just when in some of the part-time hobby type stuff I've been doing in regards to Millbrook Valley Trail. So I'll just share my screen. It's not a terribly long presentation. If the committee's interested in any more details, we can do a follow-up session, I was thinking. I really only want it to take about 10 minutes at the most.
Okay.
Because I've had a couple of people during a couple of meetings ask me about some of the stuff I've been working on. So I just wanted to take an opportunity to share that here. I'm hoping you can all see the presentation. I'm working on a smaller screen, so I'll be toggling back and forth between some of the live information that I wanted to share. So I would say just ask me any questions at any time. So really what I wanted to look at was how I'm leveraging some cloud-based GIS and some other open source technologies for just some of my interests in Millbrook Valley Trails. Just an overview slide. Although I said it wasn't about GIS, I think it's important just to have a quick one slide overview of GIS. Then I'll talk a little bit about cloud-based GIS and open source GIS technologies. I'm going to try to minimize the view of everybody. There we go. Then I'll get into just discussion on some trails mapping applications that I've been using and some data sources that I've been using. And I'll look at the work that I'm doing specifically in regards to Millbrook Valley Trails, and then I'll just open it up to discussion. So I don't have a slide on myself. I put all this together and I thought, well, should I talk about me at all? But I don't know if everybody's familiar. I'm in the GIS sector. I work in geomatics for just about the last 20 years. I'm a spatial analyst, and I'm employed at the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, though I'm not representing the ministry on this committee. My interest is purely my personal interest in use of the trails. But I use GIS for a variety of things that I'm working on in terms of when I'm looking at Millbrook Valley Trails and pressures on our system. So GIS is an information system, and like any information system we use, it's comprised of, I think, these 5 fundamental things. Hardware, like the computers themselves, specialized software that runs GIS. The people factor is extremely important. As you've seen with the work that Work has been doing with our mapping, it's a huge component. Even still, with as much as GIS has been automized and put into the cloud over the last 10 to 15 years, people is still a huge factor, as well as the procedures and methods that people use to produce information products from a GIS. And then obviously underlining data, so your thematic layers and such that you find on a map, like imagery or topographic base mapping. All of that type of information needs to come together into a cohesive system to be able to extract information from it. Cloud-based GIS is something that's kind of new again. In the older days, GIS was largely somewhat a cloud-based system where you had to have maybe a terminal that you accessed a larger computer from. And then with the rise of PCs, it's, over the last 20 years, it was pushed out to specialized desktop software users. And now we're actually seeing a return back from where it came in terms of a move towards the cloud, where people can have access to information through like a web browser. But typically and traditionally, GIS has been something that you've done on specialized desktop computers or server computers. Like everything in technology, GIS has been making this move to the cloud. So just like how we've used our email through a web browser, you're relying on a cloud system. There's a lot of good information products and systems now that are implemented in the cloud for GIS. You probably already using a lot of these cloud-based GIS tools, and you may not even be familiar with this terminology, but you're actually online and using some of these mapping applications. The one that I'm going to show today is Esri's online GIS, which is a good example of cloud-based GIS. So I'm just going to really quickly show some of the information that I'm talking about here. So if I go to this tab here, so I've logged into something called arcgis.com. I have 3 different accounts for the system. One is this one that I'm logged into is my personal account, and I have a bunch of content and some mapping applications that I've been working on that are uploaded to this environment. Let's see if it will load. If not, we'll go back to PowerPoint. So I can click on this web map here. And there's a description of the layers and the information products that I'm using in the map. And then I can open it online through a map viewer. I could open this map in a desktop GIS if I wanted to do that as well. And I can then share this map with other users over the web, which is not something you can do if you're working on GIS just on your desktop readily. You might be able to share like a PDF map or a JPEG map from a GIS, but typically you wouldn't have the ability to share the map unless you're working online. So this is the last place I was looking at, and that's just where it's showing. You can see the section of Station Trail here. These trails are actually coming in from online maps that Orca has produced and published in ArcGIS Online. And I'm just simply referencing them and consuming them into this map. And I have a variety of other information resources that I've put on here. And I've simply made a map here. I think there was one time when we were talking about the sinkhole and I needed to send a picture of it or a map of it to somebody at the township. So I had made a map in this online GIS environment. And as you see, if I pan out, all of these maps are, you can see the trails that you're familiar with are mapped here through Orca's trail mapping. But I believe also that these trails are also integrated into another product that I was going to talk to, which is the, yeah, you can just kind of see that. I'd have to change the symbology, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on these details, but you can see here some of the trail information for Millbrook Valley Trails has actually been shared with the provincial database of trails, and it's mapped on their system. But obviously the Orca trails provide a lot more detail and information than that public, than that provincial level map. So the only other point I wanted to make here was that these maps can be shared, like I mentioned, online, but they can actually be embedded into websites as well. And that's fairly routine, is you can extract the code for these online maps, and then you can embed them in your own websites. So for instance, the township website, you could take one of these online maps and embed it into your township website so that you could have a very clean, simple view of one of these maps for people to use. And then you can then go into these maps and then print them, which is what I use them for. If there's an area that I'm not familiar with, I can make my own custom map and print it off for my own use and include the information that I'm interested in. Open source GIS. A lot of people think of open source GIS as free GIS, but it's not. It's not that. Traditionally, GIS technologies have been proprietary, and by that I mean you need to purchase specialized software from a vendor and install it on your computers. GIS, open source GIS, has actually been around for a long time. I think a lot of people think about it as freeware, but there's a difference between free software and open source software. The difference is that open source software allows people to develop or contribute enhancements to the GIS, whereas freeware is typically a free software application, something like Zoom, where a vendor wants people to use their software, but there's often some kind of a charge or way that they make some money off of having people use their software. So I mentioned it's been around here for a long time. In fact, you can go back to like the mid 80s when open source GIS was first being developed. But more recently, there's been a lot more examples of open source GIS. Everything from Grass GIS, which is an old software that was developed in the 80s, but it's still around, to the more modern open source GIS, like something called Qgis, which is what I use. That is open source, and it's actually very usable now and very much an alternative to a proprietary piece of software. So if you can still see my screen, here I have QGIS installed on my home computer that I've been using for a lot of the mapping work that I'll talk to in my next slide. So what I've got here is I've downloaded some free data, LiDAR data that's been acquired over our area. It's actually available for all of Peterborough County, all the way down to Northumberland. And it's high-res information that's been collected for the area. So here I'm zooming into that sinkhole that I think most of us now are familiar with, and that was repaired by Eagleson. So GIS gives you as you can see, it's quite functional. I can get a really good plan developed if I wanted to, in terms of how much volume is on this site, or the actual location of the trail. So this trail you can see here was marked with the GPS handheld, but now with the information that I have here in this open source GIS, such as the LiDAR, I could actually improve that trail location, because I can actually now locate it against what's underneath the canopy. So it helps you to improve the accuracy. But again, without getting into all the detail here, is I can take a lot of the layers that you saw in that online map, and I can actually open them up in this this desktop application. I can work on some more customized mapping. But one of the shortcuts I found recently, and I think John Frizzle was actually using this in a recent meeting, he was using the County of Peterborough Maps, which is an excellent online tool. You can actually see a lot of the information that we have for trails in the Peterborough GIS. So they have, I think the trails that are mapped from the province in here, but they don't have our detailed trails for Millbrook Valley trails. So for instance, you can't see the newer station trail, which is not integrated into the provincial trails database. But if I pan down towards the south trails, you'll see those Med Mountain trails and the Baxter Creek trails that lead down here into the south trails on the Peterborough GIS. And likewise, they actually have the LiDAR data that I was showing from my desktop GIS. They actually have that on the Peterborough GIS. And they have some really neat tools here that I use for making my own maps, because you can plot a line on the map, and then you can actually export that into a file format that I can then open up on my open source QGIS technology that I was just showing in that last, so over here, right? So I actually recently just sketched out this proposed linkage here that goes from Station Park up to Fallis Line. I sketched that out in the Peterborough GIS map, and then downloaded it and opened it up in this desktop open source GIS because it was just so easy to do. And the thing is on the Peterborough GIS, I can't save a session. So once I finish doing what I'm doing here and close, it's gone. I have to restart again. Whereas in my desktop GIS, just like a Word or a PowerPoint presentation or an Excel file, I can save what I'm doing here and go back to it at any time. I talked a little bit about, can somebody, I haven't heard anybody recently. Can I just make sure that I'm still online?
Yep.
Okay, good. I'm just a couple slides left here. I just want to mention that I showed the Ontario Trails Network, which is the official trails for the province. So there has been some contribution towards that that database. I'm sure some of you are familiar with, I know Dave's familiar with Trails Forks Trails database, which has a lot of good information for some official trails and also unofficial trails. I just showed you the Peterborough GIS. And then I spoke a little bit about ArcGIS Online. But I didn't talk about CA maps, and I didn't want to speak to it until I had a chance to talk to Meredith. But I noticed on CA, CA Maps ArcGIS Online, which is essentially Conservation Ontario's implementation of Esri's ArcGIS Online Cloud GIS. I know there's a lot of terminology here, but Orca has contributed some Millbrook Valley Trails mapping applications to the CA Maps environment. But Meredith, I don't know if you want to speak to this now or have in discussion, but I did notice that there's a lot of good work here, but it's not complete. But it is quite excellent. And at some point, I think the committee should take a hard look at some of the products that Orca has been developing here for potentially, again, maybe including on a township-based website so that the public could have official access to the information products that we think are important. So this is one, I'm just randomly opening up one here just to show it in my web browser.
Yeah, what you're seeing there is the information that the students put together.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's all the Fleming student information. So this was the easiest platform for the students and our GIS technician to work together because we don't have our own GIS staff, so we use Ganaraska staff. Right. And so this gave them the ability to see what it is. I don't know where this is in terms of being updated. I would have to check with Alyssa to see if this gets updated automatically at the same time as the other maps that we've been working on. That I'm not sure of because I don't know how integrated all of the systems are at Ganaraska.
Yeah,
if there were questions, I could certainly ask those questions, but I don't have the answers again because it's not done in-house.
Yeah, and I was hoping to have a chance to have spoken to you, Meredith, before I showed some of this because I didn't want to create any confusion. But they've done some really good work here. Again, some of it is, and this is just one of the mapping applications that they've developed and posted to CA Maps. But there was a number of other really interesting online mapping applications that they developed. So I think, again, further discussion. I didn't want to get into the weeds on some of this today. I just wanted to show the committee these are some of the things I've been looking at. If there's no other questions, just to wrap up here, I have a couple of slides. My focus right now has been using GIS for mapping trails that are not on the system and any observations I have along that time. So for instance, in my trails report, I was talking about some broken boards. GIS is a great way for tracking issues on trails, whether they be sinkholes, broken boards, repair requirements, spread of invasive species. GIS is used frequently for essentially tracking spatial information. So I'm using it on my spare time to just record observations that I have. I think probably some of you are familiar with, since the sinkhole issues happened, I've been partnering with Trout Unlimited Millbrook chapter, and I've set up some monitoring locations along the Baxter Creek trib that I'm most familiar with here. And I've been tracking some of that in a spreadsheet that's linked to my GIS. So it's just a really handy way of keeping track and organizing information. My real focus though in GIS has been on the second bullet, and that's been looking at the proposed routes in the Cavan Monoghan Trails Master Plan. And I'm not going to open up the plan right now and get into the detail of it. I think that would be a really great workshop session for the committee to work in. But I have been, as you saw in my desktop GIS, I've been mapping out the proposed routes that I see in the master plan and putting them into my own desktop open source GIS. The reason for that is I've been providing some comments on some subdivision plans that I've seen that have come out recently for developments along Fallis Line. And I'm just interested in seeing if this proposed route, for instance, option A, the Station Park to Fallis Line extension is being considered in that development, because it is in our master plan. Then likewise, there's a proposed route that follows the Peterborough railbed from the trailhead at Station Trail and 10 all the way out to Cedar Valley over at Hutchinson. So I've been using all sorts of information to just map these routes that are in our Trails Master Plan into a more high resolution map. Because if you're familiar with the Trails Master Plan, it's actually fairly difficult to discern the detail on where those routes are actually going to fall on the ground. So I can get a better sense of where they're going to fall by referencing the information resources that you can see on the screen here. I've also been using it just for documenting some other observations I've had. I mentioned the Baxter Creek Trib, what I called the Jail Hill catchment. And I've been just recording some other observations that I've been doing around the Millbrook Correctional Center property. I've been in conversations with the Kawartha Land Trust in looking at that property and recording some values for it in case there's a future opportunity to acquire and or partner with any local groups on some kind of a protection strategy for that property. I think I've already gone through some of these information resources here. I wasn't going to plan to demo them all in detail, but that's really the end of my presentation. Hopefully that wasn't too quick and too high level or too much information, but I just wanted to give a sense of what I've been working on.
Craig, when you're mapping the routes from the master plan, you're just, the tools you're using, you're just able to draw that line onto the screen?
Yes.
And it gets translated to a GPS coordinate?
Well, or a Latin long coordinate, what some people might call a GPS coordinate, which is just a Latin long coordinate, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So I do that in here, but again, I'm doing that because I'm referencing it to, high accuracy base mapping information. So in a nutshell, when you're, underneath the trees with the GPS, you get a mixed signal from the satellite systems. Mm-hmm. And that's why these lines that are walked in the field are quite jagged and don't line up because the GPS is going in and out of reception, right? Whereas if I have a known base that I can map against, so this LiDAR data I know is good to 5 centimeter vertical accuracy and plus or minus 30 centimeters horizontal on the ground. So when I place that line, I can actually see the feature on the landscape, right? Yeah. So I actually got a really nice clean line of where that trail would exist based on the accuracy of that data, which is more accurate than a recreational handheld GPS. There are ways to get underneath the trees with GPS, but you really have to get down to setting up basically a surveying method to get a location on a road, and then you go into the woods and traverse off of a station that you have set up on a road. Don't want to get into all the details of that, but typically trails that are being mapped with GPS, like we're looking at here, are mapped with a backpack GPS or recreational GPS. They're not survey grade.
Okay, I'm curious because the with the beginner trails that we've proposed for the M&R property or M&RF property on Zion Line, we're just delayed there with the approval process because of COVID, and so I mean the next step is to get an in-person meeting with or at least get them out to the site to see our trail or to see our proposed area for the trail. But in a recent conversation with my contact there, he suggested just sending him some good GPS data that could show them exactly where we were going to put the trail. Mm-hmm. And I think ideally they would like to see, the number of turns and sort of, and really just like a best guess at how the trail will be laid out. And I wasn't quite sure how to do that with, either on my phone, but to to give them any, you know, any information that was as detailed as this. I could give them a screen grab or an overlay, but nothing that would have actual data attached to it. So this is actually really good timing.
Yes.
And I'll just save it as a conversation that you and I can have later, maybe, and you can just help me get started.
Absolutely, you know, if you get started. Yeah, and if you, like I said, the Peterborough GIS that John was using that one day is excellent, but you can't save the work or the observations you're making. You have to go back and recreate them every time.
Right.
If we can set up a process for you to generate those lines and then download them, I can then put them into my open source GIS. Or perhaps that's something, I mean, I don't want to take away from a lot of the value of having Orca on board with Meredith, but I know her staff are probably quite busy too. So if there's any volunteer work that I can help contribute to while making sure that we don't cross over any paths with Orca, I'd be happy to help with there.
That's great.
Yeah, because the detailed information, like as a planning tool, if you're looking at new routes, again, you're getting high resolution topographic data. So particularly like, I know we're looking at potentially rerouting the Baxter Creek extension, if I'm using the right term. Like GIS can help you because, you know, you can see the top of bank here, right? You know, if there's a trail that's coming through here and it's through a creek, you can quickly, you know, make a decision. Oh, here's the top of bank. This will take us out of the floodplain. We can work our way around here. You could see that in reference to property boundaries, whatnot. So yeah, definitely something we can talk further about, Dave.
Okay, so interesting that you refer to that as like, to me, it just looks like you've gone from farmer's field to bush, but there's a grade change there that you can identify, or you just...
Yes, absolutely. And I wasn't intending on doing a detailed demo, but yeah, you can get a visible profile of this landscape as well. If you click on, if I click on the screen, I can get the information for the actual elevation values for any within every 50 centimeters on the ground, so you can quickly understand the lay of the land. I mean, here with this hill shade, it's quite obvious that we're looking at the rail bed here that's raised, but it's not just it's all that information is available to you at the click of the screen too.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Just while we have the line along that other rail bed that goes up toward Wallace Line. You know, there is some pressure on us to have some accessible trails for mobility challenged people, and that is a very level rail bed and would be very amenable to that use. It's rather like it's well surfaced as it is, so it would be easy to adapt to that use. I'm remembering, I think this is real, I don't think I dreamt it, that at one point when we were considering Station Trail, considering getting it underway, we were under some pressure from, was it the fire department? Because they had essentially a big ATV, I forget what it was called, an HIV or something like that.
Yeah.
That they wanted access across the bridges for that. And I'm wondering, and in part, as I recall, it had something to do with some of the streets in the new development being dead end or not accessible from a certain direction for rescue, something like that. Am I imagining any of this stuff, or is it real?
That's true. No, that's real, yeah.
So I just wonder if we'd be under pressure to make that an ATV, essentially a large ATV accessible trail.
Yeah, I think it's currently being used as an unofficial ATV trail. So yeah, it may become political.
Yeah, and I think the user of that already very large ATV, it feels pretty strongly about his rights to use all of that land, however he likes.
Craig and I had a bit of a chat about this a few weeks ago in a because they're looking at developing that field into another phase of development. And during the comments process, we both were kind of in the same opinion that both the historical and the trails value were pretty important to keep that rail bed as is, where is, and find a way to incorporate that as a part of the new subdivision, I guess, though, as a part of the plan. So we were hoping to try to make a case for that on both sides.
Yeah, and I'll just close off here. That was the scope of my presentation, was just to look at what I've been doing. I wasn't intending on using this as a platform to start a discussion on some of these other developments that are coming in. Obviously, when you start to see some of the information on the map that I'm working on, I think it kind of naturally leads to that conversation. Again, I think that might be something we'd want to have a more focused session on and discussion, because I think if you look at the Trails Master Plan, there is some direct language in there about preserving cultural heritage and natural heritage features in incorporating those types of features into planned subdivisions. But again, that's outside of the scope of my presentation today. But I just wanted to show people what I'm doing and the potential applications thereof, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
So thanks for that.
well, thank you. That's
Thanks, Greg.
great. Meredith, while we're on this, any update on the GIS?
Yeah, I sent everything out. Elena sent it out with the agenda. It's attached. So I did ask everyone to take a look and let me know if they have any questions or comments or suggested revisions with this final version. Robert, I did respond to your email, but I didn't hear back from you about any direction related to the format of files that Big Sky Design wanted. So
Yeah, I've got a meeting with Rob this week. I'm trying to set.
okay, so you can just let me know if you need anything from me. But yeah, it's really just take a look and see if everyone's happy with the maps where they're at. Alyssa did make the changes. I think everything's been captured, but if something hasn't, please let me know, and then we can get those finalized. Craig did a great job of summarizing sort of the power of GIS. I just want to clarify that autonomy conservation doesn't provide GIS services for the entire Millbrook Valley Trails. That's not our role. We have very limited capacity. So we have one GIS person 1 day a week that provides our services for the entire organization. So what our involvement has been is helping out getting the mapping together. So there is a current trail map. And so this is the tail end of that project where we had the Fleming students help us out through the GIS co-op program and put together all the maps that you see and those online pieces. And then this last bit, which is hopefully going to be the graphic version for the brochure. But that's probably context that you may not have had beforehand. So I thought it might be useful for the group because there are members that weren't around for the previous brochure development.
Yes, thanks, Meredith. That's why I was hoping to talk to you before I presented today, just to get a sense of that. But that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. And then Elena, I don't know if the township actually has GIS staff or if you just use the county.
No, we would just use the county. Anytime
Yeah.
I need anything, I go to our planning department because they're familiar with it, but we definitely would go to the county.
Okay, and that's something that's easy for us to do as well, is provide the county staff with the layers of the most current mapping, and Tammy and her team can put them on. So what you see they have on there is what we provided them with from the original mapping. Obviously things have changed because that's been a good 10 or 12 years, I think. So I would just look for direction from probably the municipality if you did want us to share that information or that conversation, because we certainly don't want to send things to anybody without permission.
Okay, great. So the social distance signage and the trail brochures, they are in progress still. I've checked the prices of the social distance signage, and Signorama is cheap, and so we're just waiting on approval for the design, and we can get those printed and made. And as I said earlier, I'll get a couple of trail closed signs done as well at the same time. And then I have a meeting with Rob at Big Sky Design around the trail brochure. We've had a couple initial conversations already, but we just sort of have to firm things up. So I'll keep people updated on that via email as we go through. And then the last item was the property ownership.
So that was just checking on that one additional roll number. I can share that screen if you guys still want to take a look at it. We did determine that that additional piece that you were talking about at the last meeting is owned by the township.
It is owned by the township. Okay.
Okay. So that's so then that's great, because that's everything that is going from the, well, everything that essentially borders the lower edge of the fairgrounds is township owned. So that,
yeah.
I think based on what we've looked at, we could, if we decided to cross the creek to the, I guess that's the north side, we could run a bypass trail on the fairground side, provided there's space. I haven't walked in, there's a lot of cedars. And then that would get us to the fairgrounds entrance to our existing bridge.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I mean, that's good. That's nice to have that option anyway.
Yeah, so I was going to suggest, do we want to maybe sometime this summer in the next few weeks? I know the next couple of weeks are busy, and I'll be away. But maybe just set up an informal walk one evening and go out and check out and see what our options could be and walk it out.
Yep, I'd be on board for that.
Okay, Maureen?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I don't know whether anybody's been out recently, but there, as you walk along Baxter Creek, crossing the floating bridge and head toward the first part of the flooded area, there's quite a well-trodden trail now that heads off to your right, just as you're hitting where the water begins on the trail. And that, if you walk along that well-trodden trail going to the right and look to your left, you'll see there's a panoramic view of the new dam. So it would be a really good place to put some educational signage about beavers and their work. It would be off the main trail, so it wouldn't be an eyesore for people who don't like that kind of signage, but it would be, you know, I don't know how long the beavers will be there, but as long as they are, it would be nice to have something to point to as to why we've had to re-engineer our trails to bypass their engineering.
Okay, and maybe a location for a bench.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One of the comments I've received from the public in regards to what we could potentially do with the Cavan donation that we received. One request I received was that we provide more benches, more seating areas along the trails.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a thought. I mean, you know, we're all sort of thinking about how and when we can use that money. So anyway, that's just one suggestion I've received so far. Okay, so Alex is on the phone. Craig had to step away for a sec, but do we want to just set up I'll just set up an informal walk one evening, maybe in a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
If people are around, and we can go out as a group, however many are available, and we can sort of see what our options are.
Mm-hmm. That would be great.
Just, is there any immediate opposition or challenges that we foresee with the idea of putting in a second bridge over Baxter Creek? Like, you know, are we leaning one way or another? Or is it just whatever we can do? Like, to me, putting in another bridge, I mean, I like the idea of getting close to the fairgrounds there, but to me personally, putting in a bridge feels like a really big job. But maybe to you, Rob, that's just something you've done before and you're ready to tackle again. And I'm not sure about Orca's perspective on it as well. I mean, I guess we could check both locations to see what the best potential route is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be the purpose of the walk, is to see what our options are,
Okay.
what way we go. I mean, in terms, I don't want to speak on Orca's behalf, and certainly Meredith, you can speak up. But we built bridges over, and I think as long as we're do it the right time of year and have proper permits in place, it's not a huge deal permit wise. I was at the yard a couple of weeks ago and noticed that we still have a steel beam that there's only one, but depending on the length of the bridge, we could certainly get it plasma cut it in half. I think the design that we have for our bridges, what we did on Station Trail, and what we've done for the bridge at the bottom of the fairgrounds, I think it works quite well, and they can go up fairly quick. And I think they've proved that they're fairly long lasting and sort of easy maintenance. So I don't necessarily see that as a huge endeavor. I mean, obviously getting the steel in there,
Yeah.
an issue, but again, that's going to depend on the length, right?
Right.
Where we cross and all that sort of stuff. So, there's options, but let's talk about it when we're out there. I mean, we've got to do something, because essentially we're cutting off. I mean, that's a major thoroughfare, right?
Mhm.
So it's getting from one part of the trails to the other, and people now are sort of forced to just do the Meds loop when they come in from that side of the trail system. So we need to be able to connect the two somehow. And I think if we all go out and just take a walk and sort of talk about what our options are, we can come up with a plan. And depending on what happens over the summer and what sort of restrictions get eased or not, then we could maybe even look at a potential fall work day when the weather's a bit cooler and the bugs aren't as bad necessarily.
Yeah, once you choose a location, then you can certainly get in touch, and one of our staff can advise as to any restrictions and permits that would be required.
Yeah. Alex, well, you were on the phone there. We're just talking about going out one night, maybe in a couple of weeks, and looking about what our options could be to replace the issues caused by the beaver dam and stuff. So I'll send an email out, and if you're able to join, that'd be great.
Sounds good.
Okay. Anything else that the committee would like to bring up here in our last few minutes?
We were going to try to do a hike out for the mansion loop at some point as well. Maybe we could do both at the same time.
Yeah, we could do. Yeah, because we'd end up at the fairgrounds anyway.
Yeah, it'd be good to keep that project going too.
Yeah, for sure.
The one observation to share from the trails, and I don't know if this, I missed your earlier conversation about the increased traffic, but a friend on the trail was out a couple Sundays ago and spotted 18 cars in the parking area at Elgar, which is, I mean, there's room for about 6 there. So I'm not sure how they figured that one out. But, something to keep an eye on anyway, because if this continues, we'll need to, I guess, make some changes. But it's great to see. Good to see people getting out.
Yeah, just for Matthew and Alana, I've noticed an increase in cars at the Distillery Street parking lot as well. No, I haven't noticed as much lately, but certainly when the restrictions were first lifted, there were some sort of parking issues going on. So I'm wondering if we might need more explanatory signage for parking, because people are kind of parking haphazardly. Some people are parking sideways and some people are parallel parking, and but it hasn't been an issue in the last couple of weeks. It was just, when they opened things up and we had all that hot weather. I think now there's only a couple out there today and on the weekend. But anyway, yeah, parking signage may be something we need to think about it in certain areas of our trails as well as we move forward.
I can ask them to take a look, Robert. If you see it in future, if you just shoot me a quick email, I can definitely forward it off so that if there's repeat offenders, they can have a notice put on the vehicle so that they're abiding by the rules.
Yeah, no, I wasn't saying like it wasn't offending me. It was more people sort of, there's no sort of clear lines, I guess, to park on. Not that we
Okay.
need paved in lines, but maybe just sort of this is a parking area and this is not. I mean, not everybody adheres to the don't park in front of the gates, but sometimes they're doing that on the weekends, which I suppose, you know, theoretically there wouldn't be any park staff there, but that's not always true. So anyway, yeah, it's not that huge an issue. And the bigger issue there, I think, and it's something I could talk to Wayne about, is just whether or not it's going to be that parking lot is going to be graded, because when the construction left, sort of half of the original Distillery Street is sort of the gravel asphalt, and then they sort of expanded the parking lot a bit, and that's still all dirt, but it's all ruts, and when it rains, it's just sort of turns into a big muddy mess, and it's hard to access the actual part by foot there without getting it all wet. But you know, that's sort of a minor issue that I'm sure maybe the roads department's already looking at, and just because of everything going on, it's obviously a minor, you know, a minor issue that maybe, you know, is on the roadmap going forward. So
We were trying to divert traffic more towards the library parking lot anyways, weren't we?
we are, and those signs are still up, but I think, you know, the precedent, certainly the locals know about the Distillery Street, and I think sort of the precedent has been set. I'm not sure how successful we would be, but you know, when I'm up in the backyard, I do notice there still is a lot of people coming in from the old school and the library and taking that trail down. It's certainly much easier parking there. That's a much bigger parking lot and freshly paved and all that sort of stuff, but a little bit harder to find. So maybe we need a bit better signage, maybe at 10 where the old TD Bank was, directing people out to Gravel Road. But anyway, we can talk about that as we go forward.
While on the subject of signage, I just remembered that the Lyme disease signpost is still at the M&R entrance, but the sign itself is absent. And Jerry had mentioned before he retired that he had a few extra signs in his office, or had access to a few extra signs. I think we could use more Lyme notification at different other sites as well.
You happen to know where those are, Alana? No.
If
Haven't
you
seen
need
any-
them, you can
I've-
get them from the health unit.
Okay.
That's who produced them in the first place.
I've taken over Jerry's office and they're not in here, that's for sure.
Oh, okay. Are those free, Meredith? Like how
Yeah.
the township has to request those?
Yeah, you could just request them. Julie Ingram is probably the best person to go through, and they will put your logo on them for you.
Okay. Do you know how many we would need?
Um, 6, probably.
6?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll
Yeah.
inquire about it.
On the notice signage, I just remembered the other day, a year or so ago, we talked about putting small stop signs where Gany Transit crosses the fire route that goes to Jill's. We would need, I'm sure it's a standard thing, like whatever they're using on snowmobile, ATV trails, like just that little small version of a red stop sign. We should get a couple of those for that location, just for liability, but also for Jill's peace of mind as well. Does anyone know where we could source something like that?
Oh, there's the sign company in Pontypool.
It would just probably a quick and easy one for them.
Max Signs, Maximum.
I think it's maximum signs.
Yeah,
Okay.
your traffic sign specialist. Yeah, they do all the cutting and printing in Pontypool. I mean, it doesn't get much more local than that.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe I'll just connect with them and get a couple.
Yeah, Dave, I'll shoot you
I imagine it costs much.
the link here.
Okay, let me know, Dave, because I can also talk to Signorama about that when we order the COVID signs.
They'll probably order them from Maximum.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, so if it doesn't pan out, then we can try Sanorama.
Because they don't need to be like ministry standard metal signs. They just need to resemble a stop sign. I mean,
Yeah, I would think. Yeah.
Speaking of signs, again, I'm a bit off topic and I'll do it quickly, but Meredith, those trout signs that Orca has put around town along Baxter.
Go those old ones?
Yeah, they're all faded. You can't even read them anymore.
Yeah, they're 20 years old, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't know if you wanted to replace those or if they're still relevant or what.
No, that was a project done with funding from TD Friends of the Environment, I believe, back in the late 90s. Perhaps Alana and I can talk about that if that's something the township's interested in redoing. We could look for some funding, but if they're faded beyond recognition, then they could also just be removed.
Yeah.
I personally would like them replaced, partly because convincing people to respect cold water streams is difficult enough if they haven't any real vested interest in fishing.
That might be something that Trout Unlimited chapter locally would be interested in, because I think they have project funding.
Mhm. So that would be something. Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe that's something we could talk to Craig about later.
Yeah, sure. I'm back online. Sorry, I have some people over from Reliant fixing my hot water tank, so I've been kind of in and off the last couple minutes. But yeah, I'm in touch with Scott Calder. So if anybody needs anything from Trout Unlimited, I don't mind talking to them. I actually have to follow up to return some traps for them.
Okay, well, just maybe if you could mention what the status is if around the cold water tributary signs and stuff.
Will do, and I'll report back. Yeah.
Okay, great. Anything else anybody wants to bring up? Okay, well, can I have a motion to adjourn? Dave D'Agostino, seconded by Alex and Maureen, all in favor? Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. Have a great summer. Alana, we are back.